Hello, good person, beautiful soul. My name is Malika. Thank you for dropping in. The purpose of this video in a series called From the Heart is going to be about empaths. And let's first jump in. I try to keep these videos short and sweet. So what I'm going to cover, what the definition, there's multiple definitions, but I'm going to touch on a definition of what an empath is. Based on, a definition I come across online. And then I'm going to get into some details of my experiences. I was told I was an empath many, many years ago, and I didn't understand what that really meant. So I'm going to talk about my experiences and then delve into more details very briefly about like my personal experiences being an empath. I've already said personal a couple times. I'm not going to edit this, just warning. So or else you may never see, because a recovering perfectionist will come out in me and I'll edit it half to death. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about my experiences of empathy, and I'll explain more what that is. And then some of the pros and cons, and I might offer some specific examples of that as well. So I want to just, as the foundation, share, there's a couple of different definitions I came across. One, according to just like the Google dictionary that comes up with searching for a definition, it says, interesting, it's a noun, and then in parentheses it says, chiefly in science fiction, a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. So apparently I'm Neo, y'all, and I'm living in the Matrix, or Nia. And then it also says in another source, it says empaths have an ability to feel the emotions and physical symptoms of others as if they are their own. So if this rings true for you, you may be an empath. This is interesting. It says only 1% to 2% of the population experience this type of sensitivity, having the ability to feel and absorb the emotions surrounding them. And then another definition, these are all kind of in the same ballpark, but I'm just reading multiple to give a well-rounded view. Empathy, the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. So it's the capacity to place oneself in another's position. And then it says, definitions of empathy encompass a broad range of emotional states. Okay. So that's good enough foundation for us to jump in if you have not ever heard of empathy, or now you get a better sense of what it is. So first I want to talk about some of my experiences specifically, and then get into some of the pros and cons. So the reason why I'm doing this video today is that I had an experience with my empathy. I had totally forgotten about this I guess maybe ability or something. So I went and got a massage. Hallelujah. It has been so long since I've had like a professional massage with COVID and everything. Just as an aside, I had like 4 appointments lined up. And all of them were canceled. Like they were lined up, like I was like 5 days away from my first massage appointment. And then COVID hit, everything was on lockdown, and wah, 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 all that ish was canceled. Anyway, so finally today I had a massage, and one of my experiences with empathy, as the person is massaging me, I start having visions, and I had forgotten about this until it happened today. So touch is one of the forms that I've experienced empathy, where she's massaging me and I'm getting these visions, and I start asking her, like, do you do other healing work? And are you, So basically it's like, I'm not going to go into the details of like what the visions were, but I was getting a sense of maybe her aptitudes or energy just from being in the same space with her, and through physical touch, I would assume, because she was touching me when this started happening. So that's an example of empathy where I'm seeing things from another person's point of view. And then another example of empathy that I had. So I remember, this is years ago. I went to meet a friend for dinner, and I was feeling good. Like, you just had the music on and you're, like feeling light. and all that stuff. So I went and met a friend for dinner. And then after dinner, I remember feeling like so doggone heavy and like wanted to cry. And, during the conversation of dinner, this friend of mine was telling me about some really difficult things going on with her family, but talking as if it wasn't affecting her emotionally, like, oh, I'm fine, and she probably really did believe that. But, uh, being an empath, I feel like also sometimes it's like being a sponge. And so whether it was unconscious to her, whether she was suppressing it, whatever was going on, it was like I picked up her stuff, basically, like that sadness and heaviness. Cause I was like, what is going on with me? What's wrong? I was feeling so good. So that's another thing that can happen where you're like feeling good. And then all of a sudden it's just like your energy and everything changes and you're not exactly sure why. And sometimes that's because it's an ability to really go into another person's world emotionally and otherwise. You could be totally immersed in somebody else's stuff and not even realize it's not yours, but it's theirs. So that's another experience that I had. And then the other experience I've had with empathy is, so I talked about touch or being in like close proximity with that friend of mine for dinner. And then the other one is thinking of people. Sometimes I've thought of a person. And again, this is before I really understood what this was. This was many years ago. I remember thinking of a person I really held and hold in high esteem. And it was like, I saw her like laid out, not like unconscious, but you know how sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had those moments where it's just like you're so worn out by life or whatever, getting your butt kicked, just like you just kind of like lay out like on the floor, you know what I mean? Like almost kind of surrender and wiped out at the same time. So I saw her laid out. And I right now, I don't have language to be able to describe beyond what I've already shared, like the feeling I had about or the feeling I felt, when I had this imagery of her. And then I called her like shortly after, and I mentioned it during our conversation, and she was just like, basically, how did you know, or kind of alluded to I was spot on. So I didn't really give these things too much credence because it was kind of flowed naturally. And the way I would describe, being an empath in some ways is kind of like being able to speak multiple languages, right? So it doesn't make you better or different than anyone else, but it's an additional level of communication. So a person who can speak English and Spanish, right, can communicate with more people or get more information because they're using and have the aptitude to input and process more information. So I would say that being an empath is also like being able to speak multiple languages, except you're speaking or your language is kind of like the emotional subtext of things. So now I'm going to go into, because it's already too long or longer than I planned, not too long, it's perfect, whatever it is, how it turns out. Now I'm going to go into some of the pros and the cons of this. And I'm going to start with some of the challenges. So one that I already mentioned was about being a sponge and taking on consciously and or unconsciously other people's usually muckety muck. Usually, I can't say. I wish I've experienced or taken on somebody's bliss, but I think maybe the closest I get to that is like at live music concerts. I literally am like high sometimes off of those, high with no drugs or mind altering substances, but like energetically high. So that might be a good thing as far as an example, but also being a sponge can end up being and feeling like a dumping ground for other people's unwanted stuff that they don't want to deal with, don't want to face, and you don't even realize that it's happening. I'm going to put a link in the description for a book that I found really helpful called Self-Care for the Self-Aware, which is specifically written for empaths, that I found really, really helpful to kind of like give people their stuff back, and also affirming that they have everything that they need to be able to handle whatever they're going through in life, and that I don't have to, and that it's not helpful for me to like carry their burdens forever, but to give them back so that they can work through their own stuff because they have the aptitude to. to do it. So that's one challenge, is being a sponge. The other one another one I would say is like speaking up and advocating for yourself. So this has been a big one for me. And not losing yourself in another person's POV or point of view. So when I was first told I was an empath, one of the things that she said was that I sometimes don't set boundaries or push back or like confront people because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Totally true. And then she said, I've gotten better about that though. Some people are like, "Ooh, you're real direct." I've come a long way, y'all. But then she said the other reason that I don't do that at times is because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And then what'll happen is because I can feel their hurt feelings, I'll also feel the guilt of hurting someone's feelings. So it would compound, whatever feeling, saying to them has, and then it would compound it with the guilt, and it probably would even compound it with whatever energy I was already bringing to the conversation. So then it was just easier to like, not say anything and just deal with my own stuff versus risking dealing with my stuff plus their stuff plus the guilt about how they were feeling about all of that. This was, again, totally unconscious to me while it was operating, but as soon as she said it, I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that can be a challenge, is like really standing up and advocating for yourself and not losing your point of view just because we can see another person's point of view so easily, and staying grounded in your point of view. So that can be a challenge. And then the other thing I would say is kind of like, before I understood what was happening, there was confusion. There was confusion because there was dissonance or a disconnect between what a person was saying and what I was feeling. And so like, this is just a made up example, but let's say somebody's like, "Oh, I got you these flowers. I love you so much." But then underneath that, I would feel, let's say, guilt. And so but then they're like, "No, I wouldn't ask, do you feel guilty?" But they would just say, "No, I did it because I really care about you." And so it's like, what's happening? Why am I feeling this energy? But then they're saying that that's not part of it at all. So it can lead to what I talk about in another video, like self-deception and gaslighting, because intuition and this form of intelligence isn't often talked about. We're coming a long way, but it's not really mainstream. So when you don't understand what it is, it can be really confusing with your logical mind and then this other form of information coming in and them not matching. So it would create for me sometimes this kind of dissonance between feeling a certain way in an interaction and that not lining up with the person's words. You can also see how that's a benefit later on, but until you understand what's going on, it can be very confusing. So those are some of the challenges. Some of the positives and benefits and upside is that it can be helpful to see and really get into another person's world, and seeing and feeling them like from their point of view. It can help with like arguments and getting resolutions, and debates, and creating win-win scenarios that work for both of you and that feel good for both of you. It also, I think, is a gift because it can help you really feel connected. Like we're moving so fast often, well, not with COVID, but in Western society, we were usually all on our phones, on the go, like here. So connections, like true, authentic connections where you really feel seen and felt, unfortunately, are far few and in between. Like so many people feel lonely. And I would say that one of the gifts of being an empath is like when I'm with people, and I'm feeling like, when somebody feels you, when somebody feels you, when somebody gets like where you're coming from, and that can feel like such a relief, right? Like you're not alone. This person sees me, they get me, and so it can really be a gift as far as like creating strong connections and heartfelt connections with people. I would say another benefit of it, and I was also considered, I think in my family, like sensitive. I'm also a Pisces, and being emotionally sensitive, I didn't really, I would suppress it or, wanted to be tougher and all these other things, which it does require in this world at times, a bit of toughness also, not to be a marshmallow all the time. And in fact, I don't think a lot of people know I'm as soft as I really am. But that aside, one of the benefits has been being so sensitive when I'm in the wrong place. Like, let's talk about career wise. I didn't understand what was going on, but because I was so sensitive and I was in the wrong place, talking about from a perspective of soul and purpose, right, in the sense of the lessons that I learned from it and that it pushed me out of that. But when I was in a place where I was doing what society tells us to do and things that look good, but they weren't authentic to my life, they weren't authentic to my purpose, it felt horrible. And it was such a cluster F. I'm not going to cuss on this one, especially the F word, because kids might see this, but it was so confusing to like get the accolades and, to do the things that look good on paper and that people are like, yeah, girl, you got it, you made it. And to feel so miserable. It was so lonely. And we'll see this, and you'll hear this time after time after time now with celebrities and all this other stuff. It's like, why did this person do this? They should be happy. They got the cars, they got the this. Obviously, there's something missing. And part of that is that there's, at least in my experience, I can't speak for anyone else, but I was out of alignment with my soul's purpose. I was doing what other people told me I should be doing outside of me. And I had disconnected on some level from my own inner wisdom and orientation. And because I'm already so sensitive, it was excruciating. It was excruciating. Other people could probably push that stuff down and work in that same job for 10 years. For me, it was like a slow death. Like I couldn't take it. And I know that being an empath is one of my superpowers to keep me on course, because when something's out of alignment, it's like, boom, it's so visceral and so strong. It's like, I generally cannot stay in places that feel bad for long periods of time. So that's also, though, a benefit, but uncomfortable, because sometimes it's like having to take the leap or to leave places and everything without having like clarity on what the next plan is, but you just feel it, viscerally. I knew viscerally, like it's time to go. So those are some of the benefits and some of the challenges that I've experienced. I did leave off another challenge on here was about sometimes it can be emotionally overwhelming because you're dealing with your stuff and other people's stuff. But I think for the most part, I covered my experiences, or at least touched on it to explain for other people. And I would love to hear from you if you think you're an empath, or even if you don't, like some of your experiences or whatever, or questions or different ways that your ability, if you are an empath, what you've had, like how it speaks to you, how you experience it. Because I'm sure that there's a myriad of ways that this, I'm going to call it gift, that this gift can unfold. So thank you so much for watching. Many blessings. And if you'd like to hear more about, more about being an empath, I'd be curious to hear like what aspects or what things you would like to hear more about, if there's anything at all. All right, until the next time, deuces. Peace and love. Bye-bye.